What if the reflection staring back at you in the mirror wasn't really you? What if it was something darker, something waiting for you to look too long, to slip just a little too far into its depths? For Kate Palmer, a woman who thought she understood fear, the mirror would be the one to show her just how wrong she was. Kate Palmer had always been the strong one. She was a 29-year-old criminal defense lawyer with a steady job and a life that seemed perfectly in order. She had her friends, her career, her routine. Everything she had worked for was secure. But, for as long as Kate could remember, there had been one thing that unsettled her: her apartment. It wasn't the creaky floorboards or the drafty windows. It wasn't the flickering streetlight outside her window or the occasional strange noises at night. It was the old mirror hanging above the fireplace, a relic from her childhood home. It had been passed down from generation to generation. When Kate moved into her apartment, it was one of the few things she insisted on bringing with her. She figured it was a family heirloom, a connection to her past, but something about it was off. At first it was subtle, a flicker in the corner of her vision, a slight shift in the way her reflection moved, like it was a moment behind her actions, or sometimes a little too quick to match her movements. Kate would shake it off. It was probably just stress from work, she told herself. That was until one night, when everything changed. It was late, around 2 a.m., when Kate stumbled back into her apartment after a long day at the office. She was exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open as she kicked off her shoes and padded to the bathroom. The apartment was unusually quiet, the air thick with stillness. As she passed the mirror in the hallway, she stopped, a sense of unease creeping over her. She couldn't help but glance into the reflective surface. The reflection of her tired face stared back, pale and hollow, the same as it always was. But as she looked longer, something didn't feel right. Her reflection wasn't moving the same way she was. She stood still, her breath catching in her throat. Her reflection's eyes followed hers, but they didn't seem to belong to her. There was a coldness there, a vacant stare that wasn't her own, as if someone else were staring back at her, a stranger wearing her face. Kate blinked. The reflection blinked too. She stepped closer to the mirror, pressing her hand against the cool surface. Her reflection did the same, but it didn't mirror her movements. It paused for just a second before its hand pressed against the glass, a little too forcefully. Kate recoiled, her pulse racing. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself. "It's just the light, it's the shadows playing tricks." But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping up her spine. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The mirror kept calling her back. She tried to ignore it, tried to pretend everything was fine. But every time she passed by, there it was. Her reflection, no longer just an image, but The following morning, Kate couldn't help herself. She stood in front of the mirror once again. This time, she took a deep breath and made herself look into her own eyes. Something shifted. The reflection, but it wasn't her smile. Kate's stomach dropped. The reflection grinned widely, almost in mockery, before it slowly raised its hand, pressing it to the glass again. But this time, it didn't stop. The fingers on the other side curled in an unnatural, almost claw-like way, as if it was trying to through. Kate backed away from the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands trembled as she scrambled for her phone to call someone, anyone. But just before she dialed, she noticed something else. The reflection didn't stop. It didn't. The smile on her face grew wider, wider than it should have. Her reflection didn't blink, didn't look away. The eyes behind the glass seemed to deeper into her, like they were pulling something from inside her, something she couldn't understand. In a panic, Kate ran out of her apartment, hoping the fresh air would help clear her mind. But even as she walked down the street, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was being followed. No matter how fast she walked, no matter how far she went, she felt. The next day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She couldn't stop thinking about the mirror, about the reflection that didn't belong to her. She tried to avoid the hallway, but her curiosity gnawed at her. When night came again, Kate found herself standing in front of the mirror once more. And this time it didn't wait. Her reflection reached out, a hand grabbing the edge of the glass and pulling itself forward. The glass rippled, like water, warping around the hand. Kate's breath caught in her throat as the reflection's arm stretched further through the mirror, its fingers brushing against her cheek. She screamed. With one swift movement, she backed away from the mirror and bolted to her door, but when she tried to turn the knob, it wouldn't budge. Her reflection stepped fully into the room, its grin now stretched grotesquely wide. It stepped closer, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. The figure tilted its head at her, the smile never faltering. Kate tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed with fear, her body frozen as the reflection, advanced. It was no longer her reflection. It was something else, something darker. The mirror had claimed her. The next morning, Kate's apartment was quiet, silent. The neighbors knocked, but she never answered. When the door was forced open, they found the room empty, except for one thing. The mirror was gone, but the hallway was covered in strange, smudged fingerprints, as though someone or something had been desperately clawing at the walls, trying to escape. And in the reflection of the hallway mirror now hanging in the lobby, there was a new figure, a woman with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. It wasn't Kate, it was someone else, someone who was still back, and as the door swung closed behind the new tenant, the reflection smiled, wider than ever before.